Dearest Lucy, after so many weeks without a word from Jonathan, I was eager beyond sanity to join you on holiday at Whitby. When you met me at the station, you looked sweeter and lovelier than ever. Oh, and Whitby is a lovely place. Though I was delighted to hear about your engagement to Arthur, I must admit, it made me just a little heartsick, as I had not heard from Jonathan for a whole month. I hoped so desperately that there would not be anything the matter with him. I wondered where he was, and if he was thinking of me. I wished so terribly that he was at Whitby with us. I must also thank you for watching with me the funeral of that poor sea captain. Oh, what a bitter, horrible end he endured. I cannot fathom the courage he kept as his men disappeared through that awful storm, tied to the wheel with a crucifix and beads. We had a lovely view of the procession, didn't we? The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat in the graveyard. Oh, I feel terrible that you seemed so upset, my dearest Lucy. Though I expected these affairs would give you some dreadful dreams, I was so frightened when you took back to your old habit of walking in your sleep. Your mother and I spoke about it, and we decided that I would lock the door of our room every night. She has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs, and get suddenly wakened and fall over with a despairing cry that echoes all over the place. Poor dear. She is naturally anxious about you, as you know quite well. Although, on the night of the 8th of August, you did get up in your sleep to dress yourself twice. Fortunately, I awoke in time and managed to get you back to bed without waking you. The next night, you were asleep and breathed softly. When you were asleep, you had more color in your cheeks than usual, and you looked, oh, so sweet. If Arthur fell in love with you seeing you only in the drawing room, I wonder what he would say after seeing you at rest. I wrote this in my diary and fell asleep as soon as I closed it. Then, very suddenly, I became broad awake, with a horrible sense of fear upon me, and some feeling of emptiness around me. The room was dark, and when I reached across to your bed, I found it empty. I lit a match and found you were not in the room. The door was shut, but not locked as I had left it. I hastened into some clothes and went out to look for you. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes you wore might give me some clue to your dreaming intention. Dressing gown would mean house, dress outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in their places. Thank God, I said to myself, she cannot be far, as she's only in her nightdress. I ran down to look for you in the sitting room. Not there. I looked in all the other open rooms in the house, with an ever-growing fear chilling my heart. Finally, I came to the hall door and found it open. There was no time to think of what might happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all details. I took a big, heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking 1, and there was not a soul in sight. I ran along the north terrace, but could see no sign of the white figure which I expected. At the edge of the west cliff, above the pier, I looked across the harbor to the east cliff, in the hope or fear, I don't know which, of seeing you, my dear Lucy, where we sat before. There was a bright, full moon, with heavy, black, driving clouds, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. Yes! There! In our favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. It seemed to me as if something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone and bent over it. What it was, whether man or beast, I could not tell. I did not wait to catch another glance, but flew down the steep steps to the pier and along by the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. town seemed as dead. Not a soul did I see. The time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled and my breath came labored. I must have gone fast, and yet it seemed to me as if my feet were weighted with lead. And as though every joint in my body were rusty. When I got almost to the top, I could see the seat and the white figure which must have been you. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over you. I called in fright, "Lucy! Lucy!" And that something raised its head, and from where I was I could see a white face and red gleaming eyes. You did not answer, and I ran on to the entrance of the graveyard. As I entered, the church was between me and the seat, and for a minute or so I lost sight of you. When you came in view again, a cloud over the moon had passed, and the light struck so brilliantly that I could see you, half reclining, with your head lying over the back of the seat. I ran to you, and when I bent over you, I could see that you were still sleeping. You breathed in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to fill your lungs at every breath. As I came close, you put up your hand and pulled the collar of your nightdress close around your throat, as if to protect it, or to nurse some sudden wound. I wished to get you home at once, and so I shook you until finally you opened your eyes and awoke. I am glad you were not at first surprised to see me, as of course you did not realize all at once where we were. We at last made our way back to the guest house. I locked the door and tied the key to my wrist. When we got to bed, you asked me to promise not to say a word to anyone, even your mother, about your sleepwalking adventure. I must admit I hesitated at first, but I thought it wiser to promise after all. I hope I decided correctly. It hurt how you seemed to wither away after that dreadful night. Though we mournfully expected it, your mother's heart grew weaker by the hour. But I do not understand your own fading away. You've grown so weak, so languid each day. And each night I continued to find you again and again, leaning out the window, gasping painfully and tearfully for breath. Oh, how it shakes me to see you in such agony. I am sorry then for taking leave so quickly. Leaving you tears me in two, for I fear for your health. Nevertheless, when I received word that Jonathan was ill, I knew I needed to leave at once for the hospital in Budapest to help nurse him, as he has no one. And you still have your mother and your beloved Arthur and Dr. Seward. I received word that Jonathan had been suffering for the past 6 weeks from a violent fever and had not been strong enough to write for himself. By the time you receive this letter, I will be with him. I hope that you are strong enough to ride, or that our good friend Dr. Seward can nurse you until you are. I miss you so terribly already. Your loving, Nina.
Hello, dear sister. Hello. Did you see the man who arrived at the castle last night? He's positively handsome, unlike any we've seen before.
Oh yes, I saw him. His blood must be rich and sweet. I can practically taste it from here.
Dracula's been entertaining him in the Grand Hall. I wonder if he'll introduce him to us. I long for a taste of his essence.
I can't remember the last time we had such a tantalizing guest. It's been ages since we've fed upon someone so appealing.
We should convince Dracula to bring him to our chambers. He won't be able to resist our charms.
And once he's under our spell, we can feast on him, savoring every drop of his life force.
Theoretically, it wouldn't be that hard to convince Dracula. I mean, he did always love sharing his prey with us.
And we're quite persuasive when we want something. Our beauty is our greatest weapon. I mean, we do always get what we want.
That's why, tonight, when the moon is high, we'll call upon Dracula. We'll make him understand our desires.
And when the handsome guest is ours, we'll revel in his taste, savoring the essence of his life.
Our hunger will be sated, and once again Dracula will be pleased with our loyalty.
The night will be ours, my sister, and our guests will provide a feast fit for the darkest desires of our hearts.
My dearest Mina, I wish to begin this letter by telling you, my dear Mina, how much it is that I truly love you. And should I ever return to England, I will waste no time in scooping you in my arms and bestowing 100 kisses upon your beautiful and intellectual forehead. I want to lose myself in your deep brown eyes, which bestow only love and light upon me. The light here in Castle Dracula is strange and cold. I often feel I'm going mad, like those poor inmates at the asylum where our friend Dr. Seward works. Let me begin with facts. Bare, meager facts. I have, at the behest of my employer, embarked on a journey like no other. At first, as you well know, I was quite excited to visit Transylvania, a land shrouded in mystery and superstition and the supernatural. I was curious about the culture and the food and the people, and I looked forward to broadening my understanding of the world. Now, however, there have been many times since my arrival in this accursed place that I wished never to have taken the journey. I am all in a sea of wonder. I doubt, I fear. I have strange thoughts that I dare not confess to my own soul. When I first arrived, I stayed in a quaint little inn run by a delightful elderly couple who were only too happy to meet my every need. There was only one uncomfortable moment, and that was when the husband handed me a note that had been left for me by Count Dracula himself. And as I was looking at the note, it's like I could hear his voice in my head. Dear friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you to sleep well tonight, for tomorrow at Burgo Pass, my carriage awaits to bring you to me, your friend, Dracula. After reading the note, I asked the couple if they knew much of the Count and his castle. But all of a sudden, they seemed to not understand my English, at the same time frantically crossing themselves. I found this behavior unsettling, to say the least. And in the morning, just as I was leaving, Mrs. Innkeeper came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Oh, must you go? Oh, young head, must you go? Do you not know what day it is? It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all of the evil things in the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going? Do you know what you're going to do?" I apologized, but told her my business was urgent and I must go at once. So, shortly after that incident, I boarded a carriage full of lots of locals who were heading for villages on the other side of the Borgo Pass. The driver had not yet taken his seat, and I noticed that he was speaking to the landlady. It was evident they were speaking about me, for my fellow passengers were likewise curious. I heard many words often repeated. Strange words, for there were many different nationalities in the crowd. I quietly reached into my bag and took out my travel dictionary to look them up. It was clear they were not cheering, for among them were words that meant Satan, hell, witch, and something that meant either werewolf or vampire. Eventually the driver took his seat, and we began our journey through the Carpathian Mountains. We moved swiftly, for it was evident that the driver wanted to reach the peak before nightfall. Just before the sun rose, or the sun went down, we reached the peak of the pass. The driver stopped. We looked around. Just when I thought I might not be picked up after all, the horses began to neigh and snort and plunge wildly into a chorus of screams from my fellow passengers. There appeared a great black grand carriage pulled by 4 enormous ebony horses, their coats gleaming in the faint light of the dying sun. The driver was a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat that seemed to hide his features from us. I could just make out 2 gleaming bright eyes that looked red in the lamplight. I heard one of my fellow passengers whisper to another a line from Berger's Leonore, "Die Dente Toten retten schnell," for the dead travel fast. Quickly, my trunk was exchanged and I was enclosed in a new carriage. And just as we pulled away from the others, I saw them all looking in my direction and making the sign of the cross. After several hours' drive, we finally reached Castle Dracula, a Gothic marvel that rose ominously from the Carpathian peaks. Its shadowy presence sent shivers down my spine, and Count Dracula himself greeted me at the heavily studded oak doors and showed me to the rooms where I had been staying. I could tell from the first time I met the Count that he was quite charming, but also concealing a sense of otherness that left me uneasy. At once we commenced to business. His move from his home in Transylvania to a new home in London. We spent long hours making plans, talking of legal matters, etc., etc. And just as the sun was about to rise, the Count seemed to realize what time it was, apologized for keeping me up all night, and I proceeded to fall into bed just as the cock was beginning to crow. As the days pass, I find myself unraveling the dark secrets and mysteries of the castle, which often seems to breathe with a life of its own, and I have become entangled in a web of bewilderness and terror. The days and nights seem to blur together, each moment marked only by the haunting howls of wolves that must surround the entire fortress. The Count calls them my creatures of the night. I must find a way to escape from this hellish place. In my efforts to find a way out of the castle, I have discovered the true secret of the man, the monster whose hospitality has become my prison. Deep beneath the castle's ancient chapel, I have found a crypt where the Count's body lay during the day. Whether he is asleep or dead, I cannot say, for his eyes are open and stony, but they lack the glassiness of death. His cheeks have the warmth of life through their pallor. His lips are as red as ever, but there's no movement of life, no breath, no pulse, no beating of the heart. and by night. I have seen him emerge from the windows and crawl lizard-like down the sheer castle walls, or transform himself into a giant black bat and fly off to feed, I fear, on the living. I must find a way to escape from the Count's watchful eyes. I must find a way to obtain the keys that will allow me to escape from this wretched hell by stealing them from the Count's body as he lay in the coffin just after sunrise. He might kill me, but death now seems a happier choice. Oh, Mina, I pray that God will protect me and allow me to escape, and that this great risk will allow me to return home to you. Oh, dear Mina, if this letter should ever reach you, pray for me, for these may be the last words I ever write. God have mercy on me.
Dear Dr. Van Helsing, or Dr. Seward, or Quincy, or my love, Arthur, or anyone who finds this note with me. I have written this to leave it to be seen, so that no one may, by any circumstance, get into any trouble through me. This is an exact record of what has taken place as this illness has taken me. I felt as though I am dying of weakness, and I had barely the strength to write, but I knew it must be done if I died in the doing. The last letter I wrote, I wrote to my dearest friend, Mina, just after she left Whitby, as Jonathan was ill. I had hoped that she could bring him back to our holiday, and that the strong air of Whitby could restore him as I thought it had restored me. Arthur, he came as soon as he heard I was ill, and when we thought that I was improving, we went on such walks and drives and rides, and we had such rowing and tennis and fishing, and I think I love him now more than ever. He has said that he loves me more, but I doubt that. For he said when we first met that he could not love me more than when he did then. We even planned the date of our wedding. Although I fear now that I may not survive to walk down that blessed aisle towards him. When I came home from Whitby, I started having those dreams again. The very first night, I heard some sound outside my window, and Well, I fell asleep soon after. I had those awful, dark dreams. I can never remember anything of them when I wake, but I am always so ghastly pale in the mirror, and there is always this wretched pain in my throat, and I feel that there is something wrong with my lungs, for I can never seem to get enough air into them. And so Arthur called our good friend, Dr. Seward, who in turn called his friend Dr. Helsing. And while we waited on the latter's arrival, Dr. Seward, he stayed with me for 2 whole nights and watched me tirelessly. And before then, this vague fear of sleep had grown within me, and I had tried with all my might not to close my eyes, but it was fruitless, and I always ended up sleeping. And so it was such a comfort with Dr. Seward there to finally sleep. And when Dr. Van Helsing arrived, she diagnosed me with acute blood loss, and she performed a series of transfusions, thankfully aided by a strong narcotic, and she gave me very careful orders of an arrangement of garlic flowers to be placed about me as I slept. Her orders about the flowers were so severe that they frightened me, but that night I did not fear to sleep alone. My sleep was at last peaceful and dreamless. Sometime in the morning, Mother must have come into my room, and seeing me so nestled in those flowers, she may have feared that their odor would be too overwhelming for me in my state, and so she disposed of them. I know, she meant well, but Dr. Van Helsing was furious and gave us instructions twice as severe as before, not to meddle with the flowers, so that they could serve their medical purpose. So tonight, I went to bed as usual, taking care to arrange the flowers just as I was instructed, and then I woke to that sound at my window again, and that fear to be alone crept up in me, and I ran towards my door, and I threw it out open into the hallway, and I cried out once, "Is anyone there?" But there was no answer. Fearing to wake Mother, I closed my door again, and I swallowed just enough fear to look out my window, and I saw a bat. Only a bat. But then there came this low howl, like a dog's, but deeper and fiercer. And then very suddenly, my door, it flew open, and it was only Mother. She came and sat beside me in my bed and said, sweeter and softer than her wont, "It was uneasy for you, darling. So I came to see if you were all right." I asked her to sleep with me, but she said she would only stay a while, and she wouldn't take her dressing gown off, but We lay there for some time, her in my arms and I in hers. And then that bat returned to the window, flapping furiously as if he was trying to break in. And then that low howl came from the shrubbery so close outside of the window again. When I tried to pacify Mother, but oh, she was so frightened, and then my window shattered open and glass flew across the room, and Mother screamed a scream I had never heard before. And she clawed for anything that might save her, even the flowers around my neck. And then she sat up with this terrible sound in her throat. And then all at once, she collapsed, her head striking mine. And I wanted to cry out, to move, but oh, I was stupid and under some spell, and for a moment I remembered no more. And when I awoke, the maids came screaming in. The sounds must have woken them, and they moved Mother's lifeless, cold body off of me, and I was free to watch as they laid her out and placed a sheet over her and promised me that they would inform Dr. Seward and Dr. Van Helsing of what had happened. But I will remain in the room with Mother. I cannot leave her, and I cannot go out. But I am so alone. Alone with the dead. And this fear turns to certainty that I will not see morning. And so I will place this note in my breast so that when they come to lay me out, they may know. In fact, I feel as if I'm floating. This dizzying feebleness, the wretched pain in my throat. And oh, I must be deathly feverish now. It's as if my mind or my soul, or all of me except my body, has crept up above the drapes and over the broken window. And I feel my heart fluttering like the wings of that bat outside, that bat who watches me so.
What am I to do? What am I to do? God shield me from harm this night. My dear mother is gone. It is time that I go too. Goodbye, Dr. Van Helsing. Your care and knowledge will be ever unmatched, but I fear that none can save me now. Goodbye, Dr. Seward, whose compassion I know sprang from the well of love. Goodbye, dear Quincy. I know your courage and might will carry you far.
And goodbye. Goodbye, dear Arthur. I mourn our wedding now, and I love you more than ever. God save you this night, and God help me.
Oh, dear young Quincy. I was so pleased to receive the letter from your mother about you attending the Academy of Van Helsing's Paranormal Medicine. And I look forward to having you in my lecture hall in just a few short weeks. Your mother, as I know you know, is a bit worried about your pursuit of paranormal medicine, and she has asked you to become a lawyer like your father. Though I know your heart is set on this course, I find it rather amusing that she's asked me, the founder of this institute, to attempt to dissuade you from attending my own school. Instead, I will tell you why this pursuit of career makes her nervous, as I know she has yet to share the story with you. I know she's told you that you were named after a great hero, but not what his heroic deeds were. In this letter, I will attempt to tell you all, and if after you have read it, you change your mind, I will not be offended. Though I will be sad not to have you as a student, as I know you come from truly stout-hearted parentage. 18 years ago, your mother lost her dearest friend in the world to what was thought to be some sort of wasting disease. But when I was brought on the case, I made very new conjectures and a very different diagnosis. Sweet Lucy, a fair and gentle beauty, she brought light to the darkness, and she was taken far too soon from this world. Upon her death, she was surrounded by 3 men that loved her dearly. Her fiancé Arthur, Dr. Jack Seward, and the Texan Quincy Morris. I have never seen hearts so heavy with grief as when they found Lucy dead in her room. I was brought on this case by Dr. Jack Seward because we attended medical school together, and he knew that my specialty was, well, is strange and obscure diseases. Lucy had fell prey to the most insidious evil that lurked in the shadows unbeknownst to us all. It was not until I found her lifeless form, drained of vitality and marred by the unholy mark of the vampire, that I knew all of my fears had been confirmed. I stood there in my failure, haunted that I could not protect her from what had come for her. But it was even worse when I had to tell those who loved her that though it appeared that she was dead, she was not in fact free from the scoundrel, from the evil that had ensnared her. No, we would need to free her soul from the clutches of the darkness that had taken hold. And there was only one way to do that. One vile, disgusting way to do that. We must fill her mouth with garlic, separate her head from her body, and drive a stake through her very heart. They would not hear of such a disgusting thing to do to somebody they loved. But I warned them, if these very specific actions were not taken, Lucy would rise from the grave as one of the undead and wreak the same havoc upon all of London that had befallen her. Once they knew the only way to free the unlucky lady's soul and have her ascend to heaven was to do such a vile thing, we agreed. We made our way to Lucy's tomb. And once her true death had occurred, we knew we must change all of our efforts and look for the monster that had taken such a beloved woman from us. That's when I told the men about the letter that I had found in Lucy's things. It was from her friend, Mina Harker. Now in the letter, Mina spoke of her husband Jonathan, and that she was terribly worried about him being gone overly long on a business trip to Transylvania. Well, from my studies, I knew that Transylvania was the very heart and the very core of the lure of the vampire. And we must make it imperative that we find Miss Harker. Thankfully, as soon as we had gone to her home, Jonathan had returned from his business trip. Though he was shattered in mind from his experiences abroad, I implored him to please share all that had happened with him. He let us read his very thorough journals, as well as all of the correspondence he had had with Mina. He was worried that everything he had experienced had been some horrible nightmare, that he had lost control of his mind. But I assured him that though he was very sane, everything that had happened to him was very true. Count Dracula is no ordinary adversary. No. He is an ancient monster who has been alive for centuries. He weaves his insidious web of deception and manipulation, preying on the innocent and destroying the vulnerable. And now we must find this very vampire himself. As we went to leave, Mina seemed to be weakening. I examined her, and to my horror, she had become the very next victim of the Count, though all hope was not lost, as I took action immediately to safeguard her from any further harm. I insisted she wear a crucifix around her neck, and I surrounded her by garlic on all sides. But she had also made a connection to the Count. She could read his mind, and if I hypnotized her at sunrise and sunset, she could know his whereabouts. So through Mina, we realized he had gotten onto a ship. We packed everything. We went into 3 groups. Mina and I by train overland, Jonathan and Quincy by horseback, and Arthur and the doctor by sea. We went through rugged forests, dense mountainscapes, to follow the faintest traces of the elusive vampire, trying to thwart his manipulative plans. That's when we knew that the ship he was on had made land, and the very box of earth that he traveled in had been moved to a wagon. It was none other than Romani travelers. At that point, both Mina and I had given up on the train. We were moving on foot towards Count Dracula's castle, when suddenly, out of nowhere, mounted men started coming straight at us, and in their midst I could see the very casket that carried Dracula. I knew Mina could not go anywhere near that casket, or the vile monster within, because he would steal her very soul. I covered the ground, made a circle in holy wafers, and told her that no matter what happened, no matter what she experienced, she was not to leave that circle. Then we heard shouts, and it was none other than our intrepid heroes, Jonathan and Quincy, chasing down the wagon on horseback. They yelled, "Halt!" The Romani leaders reined in, but not before telling their men to grab their weapons. They drew their knives and their pistols ready to attack. That's when our men threw themselves from their horses and went on either side of the wagon, making their way towards the casket. Quincy on one side, Jonathan on the other, both prying at the very lid of the casket. Underneath all of the effort of both men, the lid yielded. You could hear the screeching of the nails as the lid was thrown to the side. And upon the earth lay Dracula, pale as death, like a waxen image. His eyes glowed red with a vicious, horrible evil. But then Quincy took it upon himself to grab his knife, and with one fell swoop, he took off Dracula's head. Quincy came in and put his knife through the very heart of the creature. And then before our very eyes, Count Dracula crumbled into dirt, returning to the earth, disappearing before our very sight. But Quincy grabbed his side. He was bleeding, gushing through his fingertips, and then he fell to the ground, sinking. Mina and I rushed to his side. Jonathan took the wounded man's head into his lap. He must have seen the terror in my eyes, for with the very last amount of any of his feeble efforts, he took my hand, and he whispered, "I'm only so glad to have been of service." And with his final strength, he smiled. And then he died, a gallant gentleman. So, young Quincy, you now know more about the man whose name you bear, and why your mother is anxious for you not to pursue paranormal medicine. Should you choose to embark on this journey, no, it will not be without challenges, but I know you are just as strong and just as brave as your parents. Embrace your calling with honor and humility. With grace, let your heart lead you to service, and know that your entire lineage, his heroes, live up to the name of Quincy Morris, as only I know you can. Cordially yours, Dr. Abriana Van Helsing.